Welcome to the Toledo Club in Toledo, Ohio. We're going to go on a tour of its art collection. The club began in 1889 and has been collecting works of art since then. Just to begin, we start with a painting by Ferdinand Lungren. And this is the Death Valley at Sunrise, a magnificent painter by one of the most significant artists of the American Southwest. He was born in Maryland and was raised in Toledo, Ohio. He went to the University of Michigan. He graduated in 1874. But at the age of 19, he had a bit of a dispute with his father, who finally agreed that he could go to art school, which he did in Philadelphia at the Pennsylvania Academy of Art. He was one of the founders of the Tile Club, which was a club that had 3 venues, and he was in New York City with people like John Twachtman and Winslow Homer. The other 2 clubs were in Philadelphia and in Toledo, Ohio. And the only one that continued was the Tile Club of Toledo, Ohio, which continues to this day. In the 1880s, Lungren went to Paris and he saw all sorts of paintings, but particularly by artists of the late 19th century school. He came back to America and he settled in New York for a while, but then came to Cincinnati, Ohio. He traveled later in his life to Egypt. In fact, he spent a total of 7 months there, and in 1901 came back to the States. He decided in 1906 to establish his home in Santa Barbara. And many people in California will know that the Santa Barbara Museum of Art has an extraordinary collection of Lungren's works, and particularly works like this one. Works of the Death Valley and the Mojave Desert region, so northeast of Los Angeles in Southern California. Very, very important figure. He donated a total of 320 of his paintings to the Santa Barbara State College, and a great painting to welcome us quite incongruously in terms of its landscape, but to the Toledo Club's collection. So let's continue. Dean Goldrick's painting, Girl in Red, is the feature painting of the Red Room of the Toledo Club. The lady is certainly adorned in red, a good half of the painting taken up by her very flouncy dress. And she gestures to our right towards a fan in a provocative, somewhat seductive manner. The painting is really an essay in reds, just as the artist had studied painters like Manet, who specialized in essays of black. And the artist who made this painting died at the age of 43. He was born in Germany, and quite a number of the painters in the Toledo Club's collection were born in Europe. His mother, however, was from St. Louis, Missouri, and she lived there with their family for a while and then moved to Chicago. It was there that Walter Dean Goldbeck gained significant fame for his portraits, of which this is a great example of Art Nouveau or Belle Epoque, American Gilded Age portraiture. It points us to other aspects of this rather spectacular room. And the room was originally a billiard room. It had a billiard table in the center here, and in the very center you will see a rather magnificent, very large baccarat crystal chandelier. This was actually installed in 1959, so relatively recently in the history of the club, as were red walls and carpet. The chandelier has always been with this room a mark of the great grandeur of this club. And here in the room we also have other paintings of ladies. This was, of course, originally a gentleman's club, but of course there was a passion for showing portraits of women. There have been for a long number of decades now women members of the club as well. If we come over to this painting, you will see a work by Leopold Schmutzler. And this is a particularly interesting work. Schmutzler was from the Bohemian part of Austria and had studied at the Vienna Academy of Art. And this painting of a flower girl welcomes people to the club as she offers us, with a smiling gesture, some flowers. Schmutzler worked in Rome and in Paris, and he also traveled to New York, but he eventually settled in Munich and spent the rest of his life there. He is a somewhat controversial artist today because many artists in Germany at the time had to make up their mind whether they wanted to work for the Third Reich and therefore embrace German ideology. And Schmutzler did so and was featured in the Great German Exhibition between 1937 and 1944. He had a particular work called Working Maidens, which you will find in many books about German art of the Third Reich. This painting was given to the Toledo Club by General Celian Milo Spitzer, who was the co-founder of Spitzer and Company, one of the most prominent banks in Toledo, in fact the first major investment bank of Toledo. And General Spitzer lent a lot of paintings to an exhibition in the Secor building in Toledo in 1898, and this one came probably as a gift to the club. The third lady in this wonderful room is called When Sylvia Walks. So her name is Sylvia, and she is by Louis Betts. Betts, an artist who was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. He received his art instruction from his father. He started off painting while he was working for his violin master and painted his violin master. But he started off painting landscape paintings before moving to portraits. This is a delightful Gainsborough-like painting in the grand manner of standing portraiture. The young woman's face bright with light and her rosy cheeks and her lovely hat. Betts was awarded membership of the National Academy of Design in 1914. And When Sylvia Walks was gifted to the Toledo Club by another distinguished person from Toledo history, Arthur J. Secor, in 1929. And we're not really sure why she's called Sylvia, but the Shakespeare scholars among you may remember a poem written by Shakespeare, which is, who is Sylvia? What is she, that all our swains commend her? Holy, fair, and wise is she, the heavens such grace did lend her, that she might admired be. And she has been long admired, as are the other ladies in the Red Room of the Toledo Club. Okay. Toledo's history as a centre for glass is celebrated and was caused by the removal of Edward Drummond Libbey from Massachusetts in 1888, who brought the New England Glass Manufacturing Company to Toledo. This collection of glass, there are about 35 pieces in all at the Toledo Club, tells the story of different types of glass, but especially cut glass. And cuts are made in the smooth surface of glass by glass workers who move the piece around against whether it's a piece of metal or stone to create patterns on the glass. Very, very sophisticated, and examples of what are called the brilliant period of cut glass in America, which is generally given to the late 1870s to the First World War. And so you have here several examples of Libbey glass from the early period, the 1880s taking you through to 1905. And then you have The particular marks on the Libbey glass are the famous patterns that people will know well, certainly in this part of the country. Everything from jugs to glasses to candlesticks. The club's glass collection, however, also extends to examples of Steuben glass, Steuben from Corning in New York, and also Bohemian glass from the Czech Republic in the regions of Bohemia and Silesia. But finally, there are examples of glass from Murano, and in particular, examples of the founders of the glass movement, the studio glass movement in Toledo, Ohio, which started in 1962 in the efforts of a number of people, but in particular Dominick Labino, his works seen here, which took place with Harvey Littleton, and they were the founders of the glass movement, which sought to make a glass furnace in the director's garage at the back of the Toledo Museum of Art, and started a movement all over the world. These are lovely sculptures by Labino, and one was on the cover of National Geographic in 1993. Labino was an extraordinary inventor, and maybe just one example of the many patents that he had over 60 in the US and foreign countries, was the making of the insulation for the NASA spacecraft, but in particular the space shuttle, because of the use of pure silica fibers that he invented for the purpose. An extraordinary character. Finally, examples of Tiffin glass from locally here in Ohio. So it makes a very, very nice complement to the paintings collection in the Toledo Club.